Lonely rancher won a worthless Chinese girl in a poker game, then treated her like a queen. The ranch sat far away from the noise of the town, surrounded by wide fields, open skies, and long dirt roads that seemed to stretch forever. Every morning, the lonely rancher woke before the sun. He made coffee in an old metal cup, listened to the wind move through the grass, and watched the animals slowly come to life. The days were quiet, and most nights were even quieter. He had chosen this life because it felt honest and simple, but sometimes the silence felt heavy, like a blanket he could not push away. He was not a man of many words. In town, people knew him as kind but distant. He helped when someone needed a fence fixed or a truck pulled out of the mud, but he never stayed long. He always went back to the ranch, back to the wide land and the sky that never seemed to end. His life was steady, but it felt empty in a way he could not explain. One evening he drove into town to pick up supplies. There was a small community event happening at the local hall. Music played softly, and people laughed and talked near long tables. Someone waved him inside, and he decided to stay for a little while. He did not plan to, but he sat down with a few people he knew and joined a simple card game. It was friendly, nothing serious, just a way to pass the time. As the game went on, the talk shifted from the weather and crops to stories about travel and work. One man mentioned a young Chinese woman who had come to town with hopes of finding a good job. Her plans had fallen apart when the company that promised to help her suddenly closed. Now she was stuck, far from home, with little money and no clear path forward. The group spoke about her in a careless way at first, as if she were just part of a story. The rancher listened quietly. Something about it bothered him. He imagined how it would feel to be in a place where everything was strange, where the language and the land felt choose. The idea of being alone in a foreign country made his chest feel tight. Someone joked during the game saying the rancher should take her in and give her work at the ranch. The words were said lightly, like a silly bet, and the others laughed. The rancher did not laugh. He looked at the cards in his hand, then up at the people around the table. He said in a calm voice that if she truly needed help, he could offer her a place to stay and honest work for a while. The room grew quieter. The joke faded. People realized he was serious. Later that night, after the game ended, the man who had first told the story about the woman came over and spoke to the rancher. He said the woman's name was May. She was an adult, trying to make her own way, and she did not want pity. She just wanted a chance to work and stand on her own feet again. The rancher nodded. He said he did not want to save anyone. He only wanted to offer a fair deal, a place to stay, work on the ranch, and time to figure out her next step. 2 days later, May arrived at the ranch. She stepped out of an old truck with a small suitcase in her hand. The land stretched around her, wide and open, nothing like the crowded streets she was used to. The wind moved her hair, and she held her jacket closer. Her eyes showed both fear and curiosity. The rancher stood a few steps away, unsure of what to say. He was not used to having guests, especially not someone who had traveled so far and carried so much uncertainty in her eyes. He finally spoke, his voice slow and gentle. He told her she could call him by his first name. He pointed to the small house behind him and said it was simple, but it was warm and safe. He explained the work she could help with, feeding animals, cleaning, and helping in the small garden. He said she would be paid fairly and could leave whenever she wanted. May listened carefully. Her English was not perfect, but she understood enough. She nodded and said thank you more than once. Her voice was soft, but there was strength in it. That first evening, they sat at a small wooden table and shared a simple meal. The food was plain, but the moment felt heavy with meaning. They were two strangers from very different worlds, sitting under the same roof, unsure of what tomorrow would bring. The rancher noticed how May looked around the room, taking in every detail. The old pictures on the wall, the worn floor, the small window that showed the darkening sky. She seemed to be searching for something, maybe comfort, maybe a sense of safety. He told her she could ask for anything she needed. She smiled, a small, careful smile, and said she only needed time. The next morning, the work began. May struggled at first. The animals were bigger and louder than anything she had known. The dirt stuck to her shoes, and the sun felt stronger than she expected. She made mistakes, spilled water, and tripped over tools. Each time, she apologized quickly, her face turning red. The rancher never raised his voice. He showed her how to do things slowly, step by step. When she got something right, he nodded in approval. These small moments built a quiet rhythm between them. As the days passed, they began to talk more. May told him about her home, her family, and the dreams she had when she decided to travel. She wanted to prove to herself that she could stand on her own, that she could build something meaningful far from where she started. The rancher listened. He did not interrupt. He did not offer advice unless she asked. He simply gave her space to be heard. One afternoon they sat on the fence, watching the sun lower in the sky. The light turned the fields gold. May said that back home, people had told her she was foolish for leaving. Some even said she would fail. When her plans fell apart, she felt like those words had come true. The rancher looked at the land in front of him and then at her. He said that failure was not the end of a story. It was just one part of it. He said everyone had moments where they felt small and lost, even if they never showed it. May did not speak for a long time. Then she nodded, her eyes shining, not with tears, but with something stronger, like understanding. That night, a storm rolled in. Thunder echoed across the fields and rain hit the roof hard. May woke up, frightened by the noise. She stood in the hallway, unsure of what to do. The rancher heard her and came out of his room. He told her storms were common and that the house was strong. He offered her a cup of tea, and they sat at the table listening to the rain together. The moment was simple, but it felt like a bridge forming between them. In the following days, May began to move with more confidence. She learned the names of the animals, the paths through the fields, and the small routines of ranch life. The rancher noticed her smile more often. It was no longer just polite. It was real. People in town began to notice, too. When the rancher came in for supplies, someone would ask about the woman from China. Some spoke kindly, curious about her story. Others whispered, not understanding why she was there. The rancher did not pay much attention to the whispers. He focused on the work and on the quiet partnership that was growing on the ranch. One evening, May brought him a small gift. It was a simple paper charm she had folded by hand. She said it was for good luck. He did not fully understand the tradition behind it, but he thanked her and placed it near the window. As the days turned into weeks, the ranch felt different. It was no longer just a place of work and silence. It felt alive, filled with shared meals, shared effort, and small moments of laughter. May still did not know what her future would be. The rancher still did not know how long she would stay. But for now they both knew one thing. They were no longer alone in the wide open space of their lives. The part of the story that began with a careless joke at a card table had turned into something real and meaningful, not because of luck or chance, but because two people chose to treat each other with patience, respect, and quiet kindness. The morning sun came in soft and slow, touching the fields with a gentle light. May stood by the small window in her room and watched the ranch wake up. She could hear the animals outside and the wind moving through the tall grass. For the first time in a long while, she felt calm instead of rushed. There was no crowded street, no loud voices, and no pressure to be someone she was not. Just open land and a quiet day ahead. She walked into the kitchen and found the rancher already there, pouring coffee into 2 cups. He gave her a small nod and pushed 1 cup toward her. She smiled and said thank you. Their talks were still simple, but they were becoming easier, like a path that had been walked enough times to feel familiar. After breakfast, they went outside to start the day's work. The air was cool, and the sky was clear. May helped carry feed for the animals. Her arms still felt weak compared to the heavy work the rancher did, but she did not complain. She wanted to show that she could handle her share, even if it took her longer. The rancher noticed her effort. He showed her small tricks to make the work easier, how to lift without hurting her back, how to move slowly and steady instead of fast. And tired, she listened carefully, storing each lesson in her mind. Later that day, they went into town together. The rancher needed supplies, and May wanted to see more of the place where she now lived. The town was small, with one main street and a few shops on each side. People looked up when they saw them walk by. Some faces were friendly. A woman at the market smiled at May and asked where she was from. May answered in careful English, and the woman nodded kindly. Other people stared without speaking. May felt their eyes and lowered her head a little. The rancher noticed. He did not say anything, but he walked a little closer to her, as if to remind her that she was not alone. That simple act made her stand taller. At the store, the man behind the counter asked the rancher about the new helper. His tone was curious, not unkind, but May still felt nervous. The rancher answered in a steady voice, saying she was working hard and doing well. He did not make it sound like he was doing her a favor. He made it sound like they were a team. That night, back at the ranch, May sat outside on the steps and looked at the stars. The sky was full of them, more than she had ever seen before. In the city, lights had always hidden the stars. Here they felt close, like quiet friends watching from above. The rancher joined her with 2 cups of warm tea. They sat in silence for a while. Then May spoke. She said that back home, her parents worried about her. They wanted her to live a safe and simple life. She had wanted more. She wanted to see the world and learn who she could become. The rancher listened, his eyes on the dark fields. He said he had grown up in this land. He had traveled once, long ago, but he always came back. The land felt like part of him. Still, there were times he wondered what his life would be like if he had chosen a different road. They both laughed softly at that. 2 people, from very different places, sharing the same question about life. A few days later, a problem came. A letter arrived for May. It was about her work papers and her stay in the country. The words were formal and hard to understand. May read it twice, then handed it to the rancher, her hand shaking. He read it slowly. It said she needed to fix her work situation soon or she might have to leave. May felt the ground shift under her feet. She had just begun to feel safe. The idea of starting over again in another place or back home made her heart feel heavy. That evening she could not eat. She sat at the table staring at her plate. The rancher noticed and asked what was wrong. She told him how tired she was of feeling like she did not belong anywhere. He thought for a moment. Then he said they would go to town the next day and talk to someone who could help explain the letter and show them what steps to take. He said they would not rush, and they would not give up without trying. The next day they went to a small office near the town center. The woman there helped them understand the rules and the options. May learned that she could apply for a proper work permit if she had a formal job offer and the right papers. The rancher looked at May and asked her if she wanted to stay and work at the ranch for a longer time. He said it would be real work, real pay, and real responsibility. No promises about the future, just a chance to stand on her own feet. May felt tears in her eyes, but she did not let them fall.
She nodded. She said yes.
The woman at the office smiled and gave them a list of things they needed to do. It would take time, but it was possible. Back at the ranch, the days became busy. May worked harder than ever. She cleaned, fed animals, helped with small repairs, and even began to suggest new ideas. She noticed that travelers sometimes passed by on the dirt road. She suggested putting up a small sign to sell fresh eggs and vegetables. The rancher was not sure at first. He had always kept to himself, but he agreed to try. They painted a simple sign together. May's letters were neat and careful. The ranchers were big and rough. They laughed at how different their writing looked side by side. Soon people started stopping by. Some bought eggs. Some asked about the farm. May talked to them, practicing her English. Each conversation made her more confident. One afternoon, a man from town made a rude comment about May, saying she was lucky to have a place to stay. The rancher stepped forward and said in a calm but firm voice that she was not lucky. She was working for everything she had. The man did not argue. He walked away. May felt a warm feeling in her chest. not because someone had defended her, but because someone had seen her effort. That night, she told the rancher that back home, people had often decided who she was without asking. Here, she felt like she was becoming someone on her own terms. The rancher said that the land had a way of doing that. It did not care where you came from. It only cared how you treated it. As weeks passed, the ranch began to change. The small farm shop grew. The animals were healthy. The fields looked brighter. It was not just because of the work. It was because of the shared energy between them. May received another letter. This time, it was good news. Her application was moving forward. She would be allowed to stay while it was processed. She ran outside holding the letter. The rancher was fixing a fence. She waved the paper in the air, smiling wide. He did not understand at first, but when she explained, he smiled too. They stood there, in the middle of the field, laughing like children. That evening they cooked a special meal. Nothing fancy, just better than usual. They talked about small dreams. May said she wanted to learn how to manage a business. The rancher said he wanted to fix up the old barn and maybe make it a place for visitors to rest. Their dreams were simple, but they felt big because they were shared. As the stars came out again, May realized something. The ranch was no longer just a place where she worked. It was becoming a place where she belonged. The rancher felt it too. The silence that once felt heavy now felt peaceful. They did not know what the future would bring. There were still papers to finish, plans to make, and challenges ahead. But they knew they would face them side by side. The ranch woke up to a soft rain that morning. The sky was gray, and the air felt cool and clean. May stood at the window, watching drops fall onto the dirt road, turning it dark and smooth. She liked the sound of the rain. It reminded her that things could change slowly and still become something new. She put on her jacket and stepped outside. The rancher was already there, checking the fence near the field. He waved when he saw her. She walked over, careful not to slip on the wet ground. They worked together, fixing loose boards and making sure the animals stayed safe from the weather. The rain made everything slower, but it also made everything feel calm. They did not talk much. They did not need to. Their actions filled the space between them. Later that day, a car pulled up near the small farm shop. Two people stepped out. A couple who said they were traveling through the area. They had seen the sign on the road and wanted to buy some fresh food. May greeted them with a smile. She talked about the eggs, the vegetables, and how the ranch worked. The couple listened with interest. They asked how long she had been there. May paused for a moment, then said she had come from far away and found a place where she could work and learn. The rancher stood nearby, quiet but proud. When the couple left, May felt a small spark of confidence. Talking to strangers no longer scared her. She was becoming part of this place, not just a visitor passing through. A few days later, the rancher suggested they go to a nearby town market. It was larger than their small town and full of people, stands, and noise. May had not been to a place like that since she arrived in the country. They drove early in the morning. The road stretched long and straight, cutting through fields and hills. May looked out the window, thinking about how far she had come, not just in distance, but in her heart. The market was busy. People called out to sell their goods. Music played from a small speaker somewhere. May felt nervous at first, but the rancher stayed close. They set up a small table with eggs, jars of vegetables, and a few handmade items May had started making in the evenings. Simple things like small cloth bags and paper charms. People stopped to look. Some asked questions. Some just smiled and moved on. May answered as best as she could. Her words were not perfect, but they were honest.
One woman told May that her cloth bags were beautiful.
May felt her face grow warm with happiness. She had made them with care, sitting by the window at night, thinking about how small things could still carry meaning. By the end of the day, most of their items were gone. The rancher counted the money and smiled. It was not much, but it was a start. On the drive back, May leaned her head against the window, tired but happy. The rancher said he had never tried selling at the market before. He always thought his place was too small to matter. May said small places could still reach far if you let them. The next week brought a challenge. A letter came from the office in town. May's application needed more documents, things from her past job and her time in the country. May read the letter slowly. Each line felt heavy. She sat at the table holding the paper, unsure of what to do. The rancher noticed her quiet and asked what was wrong. She told him she was afraid again, afraid that no matter how hard she worked, something would come and take everything away. The rancher took the letter and read it. He said they would gather the papers. It might take time, but they would try. They spent days making calls and visiting offices. Some people were helpful. Others were slow and cold. May felt tired, both in her body and in her heart. One afternoon, after waiting in a long line, she stepped outside and sat on the curb. She put her face in her hands. The world felt too big again. The rancher sat beside her. He did not say much. He just sat there, letting her breathe and calm down. After a while, May looked up. She said she did not want to be seen as someone who always needed help. She wanted to be strong on her own. The rancher said strength did not mean doing everything alone. It meant knowing when to stand and when to accept a hand. Those words stayed with her. Back at the ranch, they returned to their work. May found comfort in simple tasks: feeding the animals, watering the plants, sweeping the floor. Each small action felt like a promise to keep moving forward. One evening, a group of people from town stopped by the ranch. They had heard about the small shop and wanted to see it. They asked questions about May and her story. Some were kind. Some were curious in a way that made May uncomfortable. She felt like a story instead of a person. The rancher noticed and gently changed the subject. He talked about the land, the animals, and the work they were doing. He made it clear that May was part of the ranch, not a strange detail to talk about.
After they left, May thanked him.
He said there was nothing to thank him for. Respect was simple. As the weeks passed, May started to take more responsibility. She kept track of what they sold, what they needed, and when to go to the market. The rancher trusted her with these tasks. She felt proud, not because someone gave her power, but because she earned trust. One morning, May woke up early and went outside alone. The sun was just rising. The sky was painted in soft colors. She stood in the field and took a deep breath. She thought about her home, her family, and the path she had chosen. It had been hard, full of mistakes and fear, but it had also led her here, to this quiet place where she was learning who she could be. Later that day, she surprised the rancher with a simple meal she had cooked on her own. It was a mix of flavors from her home and the food she had learned to make here. They sat down and ate together. The rancher smiled and said it was good. May laughed and said she was still learning. That night, they sat outside again, looking at the stars. The sky was clear and wide. May said she used to think her life would be a straight road. School, job, success. Now she saw it was more like the dirt paths on the ranch, twisting, slow, and sometimes hard to follow. The rancher said those paths often led to the most interesting places. A few days later, good news came. One of the offices confirmed a part of May's papers. It was not the end of the process, but it was a step forward. May felt a lightness in her chest. She ran to tell the rancher. They stood in the yard smiling like they had at the first good letter. But this time it felt deeper. They had faced something hard together and did not turn away. As the season changed, the land began to look different. The grass grew taller. The air felt warmer. The ranch was alive with new energy. May realized she was changing too. She walked with more confidence. She spoke with more strength. She no longer felt like she was standing on the edge of everything. The rancher noticed the change. He saw how she handled problems, how she welcomed visitors, how she took care of the place like it was her own. One evening, he told her that the ranch had not just gained a worker, it had gained a partner. May did not know what to say. She felt a warm feeling spread through her. She nodded and said she felt the same. The journey was not over. There were still letters to answer, plans to make, and challenges waiting ahead. But as they stood together in the soft light of the setting sun, May and the rancher both knew one thing. This was no longer just a place where two strangers met by chance. The ranch had begun to feel alive in a way it never had before. The sun rose over the fields and painted everything gold. Birds called out as they flew across the sky, and the animals moved with a calm rhythm, knowing their care was steady. May had become a part of this world. She no longer felt like a visitor who had stumbled into someone else's life. Every day she discovered something new about the land, about the animals, and about herself. The morning started with chores. May fed the chickens, gathered eggs, and refilled the water troughs. She worked with a sense of pride, knowing each task mattered. The barner was in the barn repairing a broken stall. He glanced over occasionally, noting how quickly May moved, how confident her steps had become. She no longer hesitated with the animals or the tools. She had learned to trust her own instincts, and the land was beginning to trust her in return. After breakfast, they walked along the fields to check on the crops. May suggested moving some of the plants to a sunnier spot, remembering how the soil had felt damp and cold in the shaded area. The rancher smiled. It was a simple idea, but it showed how much she had begun to understand the rhythms of the land. Together, they carefully moved the seedlings, talking quietly as they worked. Sometimes words were not needed. A glance or a nod was enough to communicate understanding and agreement. Word had spread about the little shop at the edge of the ranch. Travelers passing by began stopping more often. May handled the sales with a warm smile and patient explanations. She had started keeping track of inventory and even pricing some items herself. The rancher watched from a distance, feeling a quiet pride he rarely admitted. He realized she was not only learning, but she was thriving. Her confidence was growing, and it brought life to the ranch in a way he hadn't expected. One afternoon, a problem arrived. A letter came from the government office regarding May's paperwork. Some documents were missing, and there was a risk of delays. May felt her chest tighten as she read it. She had worked so hard, and now there was a chance everything could be set back. She sat on the porch steps, staring at the letter, unsure of how to begin. The rancher joined her and took the paper. He read it carefully and explained what they needed to do next. He said they would face it step by step, just like they had done before. His calm presence was comforting. May took a deep breath and nodded. She felt stronger knowing she was not facing this alone. The next few days were filled with visits to the office, calls, and forms to fill out. May worked with determination, and the rancher was there every step of the way, offering guidance without taking over. Slowly, progress was made. Each step completed felt like a small victory. When one office finally confirmed that her documents were in order, May could hardly contain her joy. She ran to the rancher, waving the letter with a wide smile. He laughed and pulled her into a brief embrace. It was a simple gesture, but it said more than words ever could.
Back at the ranch, life returned to its steady rhythm.
May and the rancher spent mornings with chores, afternoons tending to the fields and animals, and evenings in the quiet warmth of the house. They shared meals, exchanged stories, and laughed together. Over time, they began talking about more than work. They spoke about dreams, hopes, and plans for the future. May shared that she had always wanted to create something of her own, a small business or craft project that reflected her skills and care. The rancher listened and suggested they expand the little shop at the ranch. Together they made plans to sell more items, from fresh produce to handmade crafts. May felt excitement she had not experienced in years. She had a purpose, a place to belong, and the freedom to grow. One day, while repairing a section of fence, the rancher paused and looked at May. He said he had never imagined the ranch would feel so full of life again. It was her energy, her ideas, and her determination that had brought a new spirit to the land. May blushed, unsure what to say. She realized that this partnership went beyond work. It had become something deeper, a bond built on respect, trust, and shared effort. They continued to work together on improvements. Old barns were fixed, fields were cleared, and the shop became a welcoming place for travelers and neighbors. May handled sales and communication, while the rancher focused on the animals and the land. They had found a balance that worked. each complementing the other's strengths. One evening after a long day of work, May brought a small gift to the rancher. It was a handmade wooden box, simple but carefully crafted. She said it was a token of appreciation for trusting her, for giving her a place to grow, and for treating her with respect. The rancher accepted it quietly, touched more than he admitted. The gesture spoke of their growing friendship and mutual care. Life on the ranch was no longer lonely. They celebrated small victories together, from successful sales at the market to healthier animals and flourishing crops. May learned new skills, from basic animal care to managing finances for the shop. The rancher discovered the joy of teaching and sharing knowledge with someone who truly appreciated it. As the weeks passed, their bond strengthened. They began taking evening walks across the fields, watching the sun dip behind the hills. The colors of the sky reflected the warmth they felt in their shared life. They talked about past struggles, future hopes, and the value of kindness. Each conversation deepened their understanding of one another. A few months in, the rancher realized that the quiet companionship he had once thought he wanted was not enough. He enjoyed May's presence more than he had expected. Her laughter, her determination, and her care for the land had brought light to his life. May, too, found herself relying on him not just for guidance, but for the steady reassurance of a kind and honest person who treated her with respect. One day, while planting new seedlings, May paused and looked at the rancher. She said she felt at home here, more than she had anywhere else. The rancher nodded, feeling the same. The ranch was no longer just a place of work. It had become a place of growth, belonging, and shared dreams. As the seasons changed, they continued building their life together. Winters brought quiet snowfalls, springs brought green fields, and summers brought long, sunny days. Every day was full of work, learning, and small joys. They faced challenges, but each obstacle strengthened their bond rather than weakened it. By now, May's confidence had grown immensely. She was no longer the uncertain woman who had arrived at the ranch. She managed the shop, spoke to travelers with ease, and even helped the rancher with decisions about the land. She had become a true partner, respected by the rancher, the neighbors, and even herself. One evening after a long day, they sat on the porch, sipping tea and watching the stars appear. May spoke softly about how much she had learned since arriving. She said she never imagined life could feel this full and meaningful. The rancher smiled, glad that their paths had crossed in such an unexpected way. The story of a lonely rancher and a woman far from home was no longer about uncertainty or fear. It was about shared effort, respect, and growth. Each day they found joy in the simple routines, the quiet moments, and the challenges they overcame together. They had created a life that was stronger than the sum of its parts, a life built on trust, kindness, and understanding. As they looked across the fields under the night sky, both knew that their journey was far from over. There would be more work, more decisions, and more moments that tested them. But they also knew that whatever came, they would face it side by side. The ranch was no longer a place of solitude. It was a place of partnership, hope, and a future they were building together. Even in the quiet moments, with nothing but the soft rustle of grass and the distant calls of animals, they felt the deep satisfaction of belonging, not just to the land, but to each other. Each day brought new lessons, new challenges, and new joys, and in those moments, they both realized that the life they were creating was more valuable than anything they had imagined before. The ranch was alive, not just with animals and plants, but with the energy and care of two people who had chosen to trust, respect, and believe in one another. And that, more than anything else, made every day feel meaningful, bright, and full of promise. The ranch had grown into a place of life and warmth. The mornings were filled with soft light, the songs of birds and the gentle hum of the animals as they moved about the fields. May had become confident in every task she did, feeding the chickens, collecting eggs, tending to the garden, or helping with the cows. Each day she performed her work with skill and care. The rancher watched her from a distance at times, noticing how naturally she had become part of the rhythm of the land. He felt proud, not of owning anything, but of seeing someone grow into her own strength and confidence. The small farm shop they had built together had become popular with travelers and locals alike. May managed it with an ease that impressed the rancher. She spoke to visitors with a bright smile, patiently explaining where everything came from and sharing stories of the land. People were drawn to her energy, her curiosity, and her dedication. Even those who had initially been skeptical of her presence on the ranch could not help but admire the way she carried herself, a mixture of grace, humility, and confidence. One morning, May suggested expanding their offerings further. "We could grow more vegetables and make preserves," she said, pointing to a patch of empty soil near the barn. The rancher nodded, liking the idea. Together they tilled the soil, planted seeds, and marked the rows. They worked side by side, laughing at small mistakes and celebrating small successes. As the days passed, the new crops began to sprout, and May felt a deep satisfaction in seeing their efforts grow into life. Life was not always simple. There were challenges along the way. One afternoon, a heavy storm swept across the ranch. The wind bent trees and tore at the fences, while rain pounded against the roof. May worried about the animals, running from stall to make sure each one was safe and dry. The rancher joined her immediately, and together they worked through the storm. They held on to each other's guidance and strength, knowing that together, no challenge was too big. After the storm passed, they walked through the fields, inspecting the damage. Mud and debris covered the ground, but nothing was lost. May looked at the rancher, smiling despite her wet hair and mud-stained clothes. He smiled back. That day, they both realized that challenges could not shake what they had built together. They were stronger as a team. As the months went by, the bond between them deepened. They were no longer simply employer and worker or mentor and student. They were partners in every sense, sharing the labor, the ideas, and the joys of each day. May's confidence continued to grow. She learned how to care for the animals on her own, manage the finances of the shop, and make decisions that would affect the future of the ranch. The rancher trusted her completely, and in that trust she found freedom. One evening, as the sun dipped low behind the hills, they walked along the edge of the property. The sky was painted in shades of pink and gold. May picked up a small stone and tossed it gently into the field. "I never imagined I would feel this happy," she said softly. "I thought life would always be uncertain, but here, it feels like I belong." The rancher paused, looking at her with a quiet smile. "You do belong," he said. "Not because of anything I did, but because you have worked for it, and you have earned it. This land, this ranch, it has room for both of us, and it has room for you to grow." They stopped by the fence and watched the animals grazing peacefully. The wind moved through the grass, carrying a soft, clean scent. The rancher realized how much he had changed as well. He had gone from a lonely man content with silence to someone who had shared life, work, and trust with another person. May's presence had brought warmth and life into the ranch and into his heart. The days that followed were filled with small joys. May baked bread and shared it with neighbors. She helped the rancher organize tools and plan new projects. Together they repaired old barns, planted new fields, and painted the fences. Travelers continued to visit the farm shop, drawn by the quality of the produce and the welcoming atmosphere May and the rancher had created together. One day, May received word that her paperwork was finally complete. She could now stay in the country without worry. The relief and happiness she felt were immense. She ran to the rancher, waving the confirmation letter. They celebrated quietly, knowing that this milestone marked not only security, but the freedom to continue building their life together. Evenings became their favorite time of day. They would sit on the porch, sipping tea, talking about everything and nothing. May shared stories of her childhood and the lessons she had learned from her family. The rancher shared memories of growing up on the land, his mistakes, and the quiet wisdom he had gained over the years. Together they reflected on the journey they had shared, the difficulties, the growth, and the victories. One quiet evening, May brought out a small journal. She had been writing down ideas for the ranch, plans for the shop, and her dreams for the future. She showed it to the rancher. "I want to keep building," she said. Not just for us, but for everyone who visits. I want this place to feel alive, full of hope." The rancher looked at the pages and then at her. He nodded. "You've made this place better than I ever imagined," he said. "It's not just the land, it's the care, the ideas, and the life you bring. We've built something together that will last." Seasons continued to change. Spring brought vibrant green fields. Summer brought long, warm days. Autumn brought golden leaves, and winter brought soft snowfalls. Each season carried work and challenges, but also beauty and satisfaction. May and the rancher had found a rhythm that suited them both. The ranch was no longer a place of isolation, but a home filled with shared effort, respect, and trust. As the years passed, their partnership strengthened. May became respected in the community for her skill, her dedication, and her warmth. The rancher, once known as a quiet and distant man, was seen as someone who could nurture and support others, someone who could work with strength and compassion. Together they created a life that was meaningful, grounded, and full of hope. One evening, as the sun set behind the hills, May and the rancher walked together to the top of a small hill on the property. The sky was a painting of pink and purple, and the wind moved gently across the fields. They stood side by side, looking out at the land they had nurtured and the life they had built. May spoke softly. "I never imagined I would find a place like this. I never imagined I could feel safe, happy, and strong, all at the same time." The rancher placed a hand on her shoulder. "You didn't just find a place," he said. "You built it." "You built it with your courage, your ideas, and your heart. And together, we built something more than a ranch. We built a life." They smiled at each other, knowing that words could not fully capture the journey they had shared. The ranch had become more than a home. It was a symbol of growth, trust, and partnership. They had faced uncertainty, challenges, and fears, yet they had created a life that was grounded in respect, care, and shared effort. The evening air was cool, and the first stars appeared in the sky. May and the rancher stood in quiet contentment, understanding that the future would bring more work and more challenges, but also more growth, laughter, and shared moments. They had discovered that true partnership was not about ownership or control, but about mutual respect, care, and the willingness to support one another through everything. In that moment, with the land stretching wide before them and the stars above, they knew that the life they had created together was more valuable than anything they had imagined. It was a life built on kindness, trust, and shared effort. A life that would continue to grow and flourish, just like the ranch itself. And as the night settled over the fields, May and the rancher walked back toward the house, side by side, ready to face whatever the next day would bring, together as equals and as partners who had discovered the strength, joy, and fulfillment of a life shared. The ranch was no longer just a place. It was a home, a sanctuary, a testament to what two people can achieve when they trust, respect, and care for one another. And in that quiet, simple life they found something extraordinary. A life full of purpose, hope, and a connection that would endure for many years to come.